19 years. That's how long Caleb Dawson had worked to forget Elena Moore's face. And there she was, standing on that Kansas platform like a ghost made flesh, winter sun catching the gold band on her left hand. Not his ring, never his. She'd come to marry a stranger, to survive a world that had chewed her up and spit her out. Their eyes locked across 20 feet of dust and regret, and Caleb felt every buried feeling claw its way back to the surface. Some mistakes you live with. Some loves refuse to die. This was both. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick around until the end. The train's whistle cut through the February cold like a knife through bone. Caleb Dawson stood at the far end of the platform, hat pulled low, watching the passengers stumble out into the thin Kansas sunlight. He told himself he wasn't coming. Told himself for 3 days straight that whatever business brought strangers to Markers Junction wasn't his concern. He'd come anyway. The platform smelled like coal smoke and desperation. A handful of homesteaders clustered near the station house, their faces weathered by wind and broken promises. Caleb kept his distance, shoulders against the rough plank wall of the telegraph office, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. He almost missed her. She came down the steps slowly, one gloved hand on the railing, the other clutching a carpet bag that had seen better years. Her dress was dark blue, neat but faded around the hem. A thin woman in her late 30s, back straight despite the obvious weight of exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. Then she turned her head. Caleb's chest locked up. Every breath in his lungs turned to stone. Elena. 19 years hadn't been kind to her. The softness he remembered in her face had been carved away by something harder than time. Grief, maybe, or just the slow grinding down that came from living without hope. Her dark hair was pulled back severe and plain, lines bracketed her mouth that hadn't been there before. But her eyes. Christ, her eyes were still the same. Brown and clear and honest, the kind of eyes that never learned how to lie. She hadn't seen him yet. She was scanning the platform, searching, and Caleb watched her expression shift from tired determination to something that looked almost like relief when her gaze landed on a man standing near the station house door. Walter Kemmer. Caleb knew him. Everyone in 3 counties knew Walter Kemmer, a homesteader who'd lost his wife to fever the previous summer, left alone with 2 young daughters and a failing wheat farm. Word had gotten around that he'd sent for a mail-order bride. Caleb had heard the talk in town, the gossip over how desperate a man had to be to marry a stranger. He hadn't known the stranger would be Elena. Walter stepped forward, removing his hat. He was older than Caleb by a decade, maybe more. Weathered face, stooped shoulders, the look of a man who'd been beaten down by the land and wasn't sure he had the strength to get back up. He said something to Elena that Caleb couldn't hear. Elena nodded. She set down her bag and extended her hand. Walter shook it. Formal. Businesslike. Like they were closing a deal on livestock. Caleb's hands curled into fists inside his pockets. He should leave. Should walk away right now, go back to his ranch, forget he'd ever seen this. It wasn't his life anymore. Hadn't been for 19 years, ever since the night Elena told him she couldn't wait any longer, that her father had arranged a marriage to a banker's son in Missouri. That she was sorry, but she had to think about her future. He'd been 23, broke, working another man's land for pennies and promises. He'd had nothing to offer her but dreams and stubbornness. She'd married the banker's son 2 months later. Caleb had spent the next 5 years breaking his back to build something worth having. Saved every dollar. Bought land. Built a ranch that could support a family. By the time he had something real to offer, Elena was long gone. Disappeared into whatever life she'd made in Missouri. He told himself it didn't matter. Told himself he'd moved on. Watching her now, he knew he'd been lying for 19 years straight. Walter picked up Elena's bag. He gestured toward a wagon parked at the far end of the platform, a rickety thing with one wheel that looked ready to fall off. Elena followed him, her steps careful, measured. She looked brittle, like she might crack if someone spoke too loud. Caleb pushed off from the wall. He didn't have a plan, didn't know what the hell he was doing. He just knew he couldn't let her walk away without what? Without saying something? Without making a fool of himself in front of half the town? He was halfway across the platform when Elena stopped. She turned, slowly, as if she'd felt his stare like a hand on her shoulder. Their eyes met. The noise of the platform, the hiss of the train, the chatter of passengers, the clatter of luggage, all of it dropped away into silence. Caleb stood frozen 10 feet from her and watched recognition move across her face like a shadow. Her lips parted. No sound came out. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, they just looked at each other. And Caleb saw everything, the years, the regret, the worn-down weariness of a woman who'd run out of choices. He saw the girl she'd been, the one who used to laugh in the hayloft of her father's barn, who used to kiss him like the world might end tomorrow. He saw the stranger she'd become. "Elena," he said. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. She flinched, actually flinched, like hearing her name from his mouth was a physical blow. "Caleb." A whisper, barely audible. Walter turned around, frowning. "You know this man?" Elena's throat worked. She looked at Walter, then back at Caleb. We knew each other a long time ago." "How long?" "It doesn't matter." Her voice was flat, final. She shifted her gaze away from Caleb's face like it hurt to look at him. "It was a lifetime ago." Walter's frown deepened, but he nodded slowly. "Well, we should get going. It's a long ride out to the homestead." Elena picked up her skirts and turned toward the wagon. She didn't look back. Caleb stood there like an idiot, watching her walk away. Again. Just like the first time. Walter helped her up onto the wagon seat. The springs creaked under her weight. She settled her bag at her feet and folded her hands in her lap, staring straight ahead at nothing. The wagon rolled away, wheels crunching over frozen mud. Caleb didn't move. Couldn't move. He stood there until the wagon was just a dark speck on the horizon, until the cold worked its way through his coat and into his bones. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Dawson." Caleb turned. Sheriff Tom Briggs stood a few feet away, thumbs hooked in his belt, watching him with the kind of steady interest that made Caleb's jaw tighten. "None of your concern, Tom." "Maybe not." Tom tilted his head toward the direction the wagon had gone. "That the Kemmer woman?" "Seems like." "You know her?" Caleb didn't answer. Tom sighed. "Look, I'm just saying, Walter's a decent man, but he's in a bad way. Lost his wife, farm's failing, and those 2 little girls of his need a mother. If this woman can give them some stability, that's a good thing." "I didn't ask for your opinion." "No, but you're getting it anyway." Tom's voice hardened. "Whatever history you've got with her, leave it buried. That woman's making a new life. Don't go digging up the past just because you can't let go." Caleb met his eyes. "You done?" Tom held his gaze for a long moment, then shook his head. "Yeah, I'm done." He walked away. Caleb stood alone on the empty platform, the wind biting through his coat, and tried to convince himself that Tom was right. He failed. 3 days passed before Caleb admitted he wasn't going to let this go. He spent those days working himself half to death, mending fences, breaking ice on the water troughs, mucking out stalls until his shoulders burned and his hands were raw. His ranch hand, a grizzled old bastard named Pete, watched him with increasing suspicion. "You trying to kill yourself or just work yourself stupid?" Pete asked on the 3rd evening, leaning against the barn door with his arms crossed. "Neither." "Could have fooled me. You've been acting like a man with a burr under his saddle ever since you went into town." Caleb drove the pitchfork into a bale of hay, harder than necessary. "Drop it, Pete." "Sure. Soon as you tell me what's eating you." "Nothing's eating me." "Horse shit." Pete spat into the dirt. "I've known you 15 years, Caleb. I've seen you angry. I've seen you tired, but I've never seen you this wound up over nothing. So either you tell me what's going on, or I'm going to assume you've lost your damn mind." Caleb set the pitchfork aside and leaned against the stall door, wiping sweat from his forehead. The barn was warm despite the cold outside, smelling of horse and hay and leather. "There's a woman," he said finally. Pete raised an eyebrow. "There's always a woman. Not like this." "Then what's the problem?" "She's married, or about to be." Pete was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The Kemmer woman." Caleb's head snapped up. "How'd you know?" "I was in town when the train came in. Saw you watching her like she was the second coming." Pete scratched his jaw. "Figured there was a story there." "There's no story." "Right, and I'm the King of England." Pete studied him. You going to tell me what she means to you, or do I have to guess? Caleb didn't answer immediately. He stared at the floor, at the dust motes swirling in the lamplight, and tried to find the words for something he'd never said out loud to anyone. We were supposed to get married, he said quietly, 19 years ago, before she left. What happened? I wasn't good enough. Didn't have money, didn't have prospects. Her father arranged a better match. Caleb's voice was flat. She took it. Pete let out a low whistle. And now she's back. Now she's marrying Walter Kemmer because she needs a roof over her head and food on the table. That's how most marriages work out here, Caleb. You know that. I know. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Doesn't mean I have to like it. What are you planning to do about it? Nothing. I'm not planning to do anything. Pete snorted. You're a terrible liar. I'm serious. It's not my business. Not my. Then why have you been working yourself into the ground for 3 days straight? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. Pete sighed and pushed off from the doorframe. Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're a grown man. You'll make your own mistakes. But I will say this. If you're thinking about riding out to the Kemmer place, you'd better be damn sure about why you're going. Because if you stir up trouble for that woman and it turns out you're just nursing old wounds, you'll do more harm than good. I'm not trying to cause trouble. Maybe not. But trouble has a way of finding you anyway. Pete left. Caleb stood alone in the barn, listening to the horses shift in their stalls, and knew Pete was right. He went anyway. The Kemmer homestead sat at the edge of nowhere, 15 miles northeast of Markers Junction, tucked into a shallow valley that caught all the worst of the winter wind. Caleb rode out on the 4th day, telling himself he just wanted to see the place, to make sure Elena was settling in all right. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. The house came into view just after noon, a squat gray structure that looked like it had been built in a hurry and never finished. The roof sagged in the middle. One shutter hung crooked. The barn was worse, half the boards missing, the door swinging loose on broken hinges. Caleb pulled his horse to a stop on the ridge overlooking the property and just stared. This was what Elena had chosen. This broken-down wreck of a place. This man who couldn't even keep his barn standing. A flicker of movement caught his eye. 2 small figures near the house. Girls, bundled in coats too big for them, dragging an empty bucket between them. They couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, both stick-thin and pale. Walter's daughters. Elena appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She called something to the girls. They turned and ran toward her, their breath puffing white in the cold air. Even from this distance, Caleb could see how tired she looked. He should leave, should turn around and ride back to his ranch and forget he ever came out here. Instead, he nudged his horse forward. He was halfway down the slope when one of the girls spotted him. She froze, staring, then grabbed her sister's arm and pointed. Both of them bolted for the house. Elena stepped out onto the sagging porch, one hand shading her eyes against the sun. When she recognized him, her whole body went rigid. Caleb reined in his horse 20 feet from the house. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. What are you doing here? Elena's voice was tight, controlled. Not angry exactly, just guarded. Came to see how you were settling in. We're fine. Doesn't look fine. Her jaw tightened. We're managing. Elena, don't. She stepped forward, her voice dropping. Don't do this, Caleb. Don't come here acting like you have some kind of claim on my life. That was 19 years ago. It's over. Is it? Yes. The word was sharp, final. I made my choice a long time ago. I'm making another one now. It has nothing to do with you. You're marrying a man you don't know. That's not your concern. The hell it isn't. Why? She came down the steps, her hands clenched at her sides. Why does it matter to you what I do? You have your ranch, your life. You moved on. So did I. Did you? Caleb swung down from his horse, facing her. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you ran out of options and settled for the first man who'd take you. Her hand cracked across his face before he saw it coming. The slap echoed in the cold air. Caleb's head snapped to the side, his cheek burning. Elena stood there, breathing hard, her eyes bright with fury. You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what I've been through, what I've lost. You have no right to judge me. I'm not judging you. Yes, you are. Her voice broke. You're standing there looking at me like I'm some kind of failure, like I threw away something precious. Well, maybe I did, but I survived. I'm still here, and if marrying Walter Kemmer is what it takes to keep surviving, then that's what I'll do. You deserve better than survival. Do I? She laughed, harsh and bitter. You think I haven't figured that out? You think I don't know this is a compromise? But I'm 37 years old, Caleb. I've got nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. Walter offered me a place to live and a chance to be useful. That's more than I've had in years. What happened? The question came out quieter than he'd intended. To your husband, your life in Missouri. Elena's face went blank. He died 5 years ago. Left me with debts I couldn't pay. I lost everything. Jesus. Don't pity me. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. I don't need your pity. I don't need anything from you. What do you need? She didn't answer, just stood there staring at the broken barn, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something together. Caleb stepped closer. Elena, you should go. Her voice was tired, defeated. Walter will be back soon. If he sees you here, where is he? In town, selling what's left of the fall wheat. She glanced back at him. He drinks, Caleb. When things get hard, he drinks. I don't want him coming home to find a strange man in his yard. I'm not a stranger. To him you are. And to these girls. She gestured toward the house, where two small faces peered out from behind a curtain. They're scared enough as it is. They don't need more chaos. Caleb followed her gaze. The girls were watching him with wide, wary eyes, too thin, too quiet. They're not being taken care of, he said. They will be. Once Elena stopped, swallowed. Once Walter and I are properly married, once things settle down, it'll get better. Will it? It has to. The certainty in her voice was as fragile as glass. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was making a mistake, that she didn't have to do this. But standing there, looking at her tired face and the broken-down homestead and those two scared little girls, he realized something that made his chest tighten. She wasn't wrong. Out here, in this hard country, a woman alone didn't stand a chance. Elena needed this marriage as much as Walter did, maybe more. If he hurts you, he won't. If he does, Caleb continued, his voice hard, you come find me. You understand? Elena met his eyes. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, surprise maybe, or confusion. Why would you help me? Because I should have fought for you 19 years ago. I didn't. He stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar on her temple, the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. I won't make that mistake again. Her breath caught. Caleb. The sound of wagon wheels on frozen ground cut her off. Elena's head snapped toward the road. Panic flashed across her face. You have to go, now. Elena, please. Her hand shot out, gripping his arm. Please, just go. Don't make this harder than it already is. Caleb looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. She was afraid. Not of him. Of what his presence here might cost her. He stepped back, pulled himself up onto his horse. I meant what I said, he told her. You need help. You come find me. She didn't respond, just stood there, watching as he turned his horse and rode away. Caleb didn't look back, but he heard the wagon rattle into the yard behind him, heard Walter's slurred voice calling out to Elena, and felt something dark and cold settle in his gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks passed. Caleb tried to stay away, tried to focus on his own work, his own life. But Elena's face haunted him, the exhaustion, the fear, the brittle determination in her eyes. He started riding past the Kemmer place once a week, always at a distance, always careful not to be seen. Just checking, just making sure. What he saw didn't ease his mind. The barn stayed broken. The house sagged further, and Walter's wagon showed up in town more and more often, usually parked outside the saloon. On the 3rd week, Caleb was in the general store when he overheard 2 women talking. Saw her in church last Sunday, one was saying, thin as a rail, and those poor girls, Walter's a fool, drinks away what little money they have. She knew what she was getting into. Mail-order brides always do. Still, it's hard to watch. Caleb paid for his supplies and left before he said something he'd regret. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows, and made a decision he knew was probably stupid. He was going back. Not to cause trouble. Not to interfere. Just to see for himself that Elena was all right. He rode out the next morning before sunrise. He found her in the barn. She was alone, mucking out a stall with a pitchfork that was nearly as tall as she was. Her dress was stained with mud, and worse, her hair falling loose from its pins. She worked with the kind of grim determination that came from having no other choice. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment before he spoke. "You shouldn't be doing this alone." Elena spun around, the pitchfork raised like a weapon. When she saw him, her shoulders sagged. "Jesus, Caleb, you scared me half to death." "Sorry." She lowered the pitchfork, breathing hard. "What are you doing here? Checking on you. I told you." "I know what you told me." He stepped into the barn. "Where's Walter?" Her expression closed off. "Town." "Again?" "He had business." "At the saloon?" Her jaw tightened. "That's not your concern." Caleb looked around the barn, at the sagging roof, the broken stalls, the thin layer of ice on the water trough. "Where are the girls?" "In the house, doing lessons." "You teach them." "Someone has to." Elena stabbed the pitchfork into the ground and leaned against it, exhaustion written in every line of her body. "Walter can barely read. The school's 15 miles away, so yes, I teach them." "That's good." "Is it?" She laughed, bitter. "They're half-starved and terrified of their own father. I don't know if teaching them to read makes up for that." The words hung in the cold air between them. Caleb took a careful step forward. "Elena, if things are bad, they're not. Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying," but her voice wavered. "We're managing. It's hard, but we're managing." "Has he hurt you?" "No." The answer came too fast. "Elena, he drinks," she said quietly. "When he drinks, he gets angry. But he doesn't hit me. Yet." Her eyes flashed. "You don't know that. I know men like him. I know what happens when the money runs out and the whiskey runs dry." "So what?" Elena's voice rose. "What do you want me to do, Caleb? Leave. Go where? I have nothing. I am nothing without this." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." She was shaking now, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "I'm a widow with no family, no money, no skills anyone values. This marriage is the only thing standing between me and the streets. So forgive me if I'm not ready to throw it away just because you think Walter might hurt me someday." Caleb stared at her, his chest tight with frustration and something deeper. Grief, maybe, for the girl she'd been, for the life she should have had. "You deserve better than this," he said finally. "Maybe I did once." Her voice broke. "Not anymore." She turned away from him, picking up the pitchfork again, dismissing him. Caleb stood there for a long moment, wanting to say something that would fix this, knowing there were no words that could. "If you need me," he said quietly, "I'm here. That's all I'm saying." Elena didn't respond, didn't even look at him. Caleb left her there, alone in the cold barn, and rode back to his ranch with a weight in his chest that felt like it might crush him. 3 days later, everything went to hell. The telegram came on a Thursday morning, delivered by a nervous young clerk who wouldn't meet Caleb's eyes. 3 words scrawled in Elena's shaking hand. "Come now. Please." Caleb didn't bother saddling his horse properly. He rode out with the cinch half loose, pushing the animal harder than he should have, his mind racing through every terrible possibility. By the time he reached the Kemmer place, his shirt was soaked through with sweat despite the February cold. The yard was empty. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped, boots hitting frozen ground hard enough to jar his knees. The front door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. "Elena!" No answer. Caleb's hand went to the revolver at his hip as he took the porch steps 2 at a time. Inside the house was dark, curtains drawn. The air smelled wrong, sharp and medicinal, underneath it something sour. A child's sob came from the back room. He moved fast, shoving through the narrow hallway into what passed for a bedroom. The scene that greeted him stopped him cold. Elena knelt beside a narrow bed, her dress stained dark with something Caleb didn't want to identify. One of the girls, the smaller one, maybe 6 years old, lay motionless under a threadbare blanket, her skin the color of old paper. The other girl huddled in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. Elena's head snapped up when she heard him. Her face was streaked with tears and exhaustion, her hair wild. "She won't wake up. I can't. I don't know what to do." Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside the bed. He pressed 2 fingers to the girl's throat, feeling for a pulse. It was there, faint and fast, like a bird's heartbeat. "How long has she been like this?" "Since last night. She was fine at supper, then she started vomiting. By midnight, she was burning up." Elena's voice cracked. "I tried everything. Cold cloths, willow bark tea. Nothing worked." "Where's Walter?" Her silence was answer enough. Caleb bit back a curse. "This child needs a doctor. Now." "The doctor's in Markers Junction. That's 15 miles. "I know." He looked at the girl's flushed face, the rapid, shallow breathing. "She won't make it that far in a wagon." "Then what do we do?" He met Elena's eyes and saw his own fear reflected back at him. "I'll ride for the doctor. You keep her cool. Don't let the fever spike higher. Caleb, I'll be back in 3 hours. Maybe 4. He stood, his hand briefly touching Elena's shoulder. "Keep her breathing. That's all that matters." The older girl spoke up from the corner, her voice small and frightened. "Is Lily going to die?" Caleb looked at her, at the terror in her face, the way her thin fingers clutched her own arms like she was trying to hold herself together. 8 years old, maybe 9. Too young to have seen this much fear. "No," he said, making his voice as certain as he could. "She's not going to die. I won't let her." He had no business making promises he couldn't keep, but the girl's face relaxed slightly. That was something. Elena followed him out to the porch. The morning sun was climbing higher now, hard and bright and useless. "I should have sent for help sooner," she said. "Last night, when it started, I should have—" "Stop." Caleb grabbed his horse's reins. "You did what you could. Now I need you to keep doing it until I get back." "Where's Walter?" The question came out bitter. "That's what you wanted to ask, isn't it? Where's the girl's father while his daughter is dying?" "Elena, he left 2 days ago. Said he had business in Wichita. I think—" Her voice broke. "I think he took what little money we had left. I haven't seen him since." Caleb's jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. "When I find him—" "Don't." She stepped closer, her hand catching his arm. "Don't waste time on him. Just bring the doctor, please." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, at the desperation in her face. Then he swung up onto his horse. 3 hours, he said. He made it in 2.5. The ride back was slower, the doctor's buggy struggling over the rutted road. Dr. Harrison was a gray-haired man in his 60s, carrying a battered medical bag and a permanent expression of tired competence. "You say the child's been fevered for 12 hours?" he asked as they bounced over a particularly vicious pothole. "Close to that." "Vomiting? Chills?" "According to the woman taking care of her, yes," and Harrison grunted. "Could be a dozen things. Most of them not good." Caleb didn't respond. He just kept his eyes on the horizon, willing the homestead to appear faster. When they finally rolled into the yard, Elena was standing on the porch. The look on her face told Caleb everything he needed to know before she opened her mouth. "She's breathing," Elena said as they climbed down. "But barely. And the fever? It's worse." Harrison didn't waste time on pleasantries. He grabbed his bag and followed Elena inside, leaving Caleb standing in the yard with his heart trying to punch through his ribs. The older girl, Sarah, he'd learned her name was Sarah, appeared in the doorway. She looked at Caleb with those 2 old eyes and asked, "Did you bring help?" "I brought the doctor. Best one in 3 counties. Will he fix her?" "He'll try." Sarah nodded slowly, like she was used to disappointment masquerading as hope. "Mama used to get sick like this, before she died." Caleb's chest tightened. "Your mama?" "Our real mama. She died last summer. That's why Papa sent for Miss Elena." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, the way children's voices got when they'd learned that crying didn't change anything. Papa said Miss Elena would take care of us. But she can't stop Lily from being sick, can she? The doctor can help, Caleb said, hoping he wasn't lying. You should go inside. It's cold out here. Sarah disappeared back into the house without another word. Caleb stood in the yard, useless, while the sun climbed higher and the wind picked up, and inside that broken-down house a little girl fought for her life. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, Dr. Harrison emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. His face was unreadable. She'll live, he said without preamble. But it was close. Another few hours, and he shook his head. The woman inside did good work, kept the fever from getting out of control. Probably saved the child's life. Relief hit Caleb so hard he had to brace himself against the porch railing. What was it? Influenza, most likely. Bad strain. She'll need careful watching for the next week. Plenty of fluids. Rest. The fever might spike again. Harrison gave him a sharp look. Where's the father? Not here. I can see that. When's he coming back? Don't know. Harrison's mouth thinned. That woman in there is half-starved herself. The children are malnourished. This house is barely standing. If Kemmer thinks he can just abandon, I'll handle it, Caleb cut in. Will you now? Harrison studied him with eyes that had seen too much human misery to be easily fooled. What's your stake in this, Dawson? These aren't your children. That's not your wife. Doesn't matter? It matters to the law, and to the people in this county who like to talk. Harrison pulled on his coat. I'm not saying don't help. I'm saying be careful how you do it. A man shows too much interest in another man's wife. People start asking questions. Let them ask. Harrison sighed. Your funeral. I'll be back in 3 days to check on the girl. In the meantime, someone needs to stay here. That child needs constant supervision. I'll stay. You sure about that? Caleb looked at the house, at the window where he could just make out Elena's silhouette moving past. I'm sure. Harrison left, his buggy rattling away into the afternoon. Caleb stood on the porch for a long moment, trying to figure out what the hell he'd just committed himself to. Then he went inside. He found Elena in the kitchen, her hands braced against the counter, her head bowed. She didn't look up when he entered. The doctor said she'll be all right, Caleb said quietly. I heard. Her voice was flat. Thank you for bringing him. Elena, you should go home, Caleb. You've done enough. I'm not leaving. That made her look up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn with exhaustion. What? Someone needs to stay. Watch over Lily. Make sure the fever doesn't come back. You can't do it alone. I've been doing it alone for 2 days, and you're about to collapse. He stepped closer. When's the last time you slept? Ate something? She didn't answer. That's what I thought. Caleb pulled out one of the rickety kitchen chairs. Sit down before you fall down. I don't need... Sit. Maybe it was the tone of his voice, or maybe she was just too tired to argue anymore, but Elena sank into the chair. She sat there staring at her hands, at the dried blood under her fingernails from cleaning up after a sick child. Caleb opened the cupboards, looking for food. What he found made his jaw clench. Half a sack of flour, some beans that looked older than the house, a few potatoes starting to sprout. That was it. When's the last time any of you had a decent meal? Elena's shoulders hunched. We're managing. You're starving. He turned to face her. All of you. Those girls are skin and bones, and you look like a strong wind would blow you over. Walter said he'd bring back supplies when he came home from Wichita. Walter's not coming back from Wichita. The words hung in the air between them. Elena's face crumpled. For a moment, Caleb thought she might cry, but she just pressed her hands over her eyes and breathed, slow and careful, like she was trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. I know, she whispered. I've known since he left. He took everything. The seed money for spring planting, the household cash. Everything. She lowered her hands, and her eyes were dry but devastated. I'm such a fool. You're not... I am. I married a drunk and a coward because I was desperate, and now I'm trapped here with 2 children who aren't mine and no way to feed them. She laughed, harsh and broken. You were right. I don't know what I should have done, but not this. Caleb pulled out the other chair and sat across from her. Listen to me. Right now we have one priority, keeping those girls alive and healthy. Everything else, Walter, money, the future, that comes second. Understood? Elena looked at him, something shifting in her expression. Why are you doing this? Because someone has to. That's not an answer. He met her eyes. Because 19 years ago, I let you walk away without fighting for you, and I've regretted it every day since. Because I'm not going to stand by and watch you suffer when I can do something about it. Because... He stopped, the rest of the words catching in his throat. Because what? She asked softly. Because I still... He couldn't say it. Not here, not like this. Because you need help, and I'm able to give it. That's enough. Elena studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. All right, what do we do? First, you're going to sleep, a few hours at least. I'll watch Lily. I can't just... Yes, you can. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. He stood. Go. I'll wake you if anything changes. She hesitated, then pushed herself to her feet. She swayed slightly, and Caleb's hand shot out to steady her. For a second they stood there, his hand on her arm, close enough that he could see the faint freckles across her nose that he'd somehow remembered through 19 years. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Then she was gone, disappearing into the back room where Sarah had set up a makeshift bed in the corner. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen and tried not to think about all the ways this could end badly. The next 3 days blurred together into a haze of broken sleep and constant vigilance. Lily's fever spiked twice more, sending Elena into barely controlled panic both times. Caleb rode back to his ranch once to grab supplies and explain the situation to Pete, who gave him a long look and said, "You're playing with fire, boss." "I know. Just making sure you know." He brought back food, salt pork, flour, coffee, dried apples, enough to keep 4 people fed for a few weeks. Elena tried to refuse it, but Sarah and Lily looked at the supplies with such naked hunger that she couldn't make the words stick. They fell into a rhythm. Elena handled the nursing, changing Lily's sweat-soaked bedding, coaxing spoonfuls of broth past her lips, monitoring the fever. Caleb took care of everything else. He fixed the barn door, chopped enough firewood to last through the rest of winter, patched the worst holes in the roof. Sarah followed him around like a silent shadow, watching everything he did with those serious eyes. "Are you going to marry Miss Elena?" she asked on the 3rd day, handing him nails while he worked on the porch railing. Caleb nearly hammered his own thumb. "What?" "Papa said he was going to marry her so she could be our new mama, but he left. So I thought maybe you would marry her instead." "It doesn't work like that, kid." "Why not?" "Because... How did you explain adult complications to an 8-year-old? Because your papa is still married to her, even if he's not here." Sarah considered this. "Papa married our real mama, but she died. Does that mean the marriage stopped?" "Yeah, when someone dies, the marriage ends." "So if Papa doesn't come back, will that marriage end too?" Caleb set down the hammer. "Sarah, your Papa's coming back." "No, he's not." She said it with the kind of certainty that came from experience. "He left before, after Mama died. He went away for 2 weeks and came back smelling like whiskey and sadness. Then he got mean." She picked at a splinter in her palm. "Miss Elena's nicer than him. I hope she stays." "She will." "Promise?" Caleb looked at this skinny, serious child who'd already learned that adults couldn't be trusted, and made another promise he had no business making. "I promise." That night, after the girls were asleep and Elena was dozing in the chair beside Lily's bed, Caleb stood on the porch and stared out at the dark prairie. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of coming snow. Winter wasn't done with them yet. He heard the door open behind him. Elena stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning around. "So should you." "Someone needs to keep watch." She came to stand beside him at the railing. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the wind. "Lily's fever broke," Elena said finally. "Really broke this time. She's sleeping normally now." Relief washed through him. "That's good, Doctor. Harrison was right. Another few hours and..." Her voice caught. "I could have lost her." "But you didn't." "Because you rode for the doctor. Because you brought food and fixed the house and..." She turned to face him. Caleb, I can't repay you for any of this. I'm not asking for repayment. Then what are you asking for? He looked at her, really looked at her, at the exhaustion carved into her face, the determination in her eyes, the quiet strength that had somehow survived everything life had thrown at her. I'm asking you to stop pretending this situation is sustainable, he said. Walter's gone. He cleaned out what little money you had and left you with 2 sick children in the middle of winter. You can't keep this up alone. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You can... He stopped because what he was about to suggest was either the smartest or stupidest thing he'd ever considered. You can let me help, really help. You've already done more than, permanently. Move to my ranch, you and the girls. There's room. It's warm. There's food. You'd be safe. Elena stared at him. I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm married to Walter. Because people would talk. Because... She pressed her hands over her face. Because you're offering me charity and I can't accept it. It's not charity. Then what is it? The question hung between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Caleb took a breath. It's me trying to do what I should have done 19 years ago. It's me refusing to watch you destroy yourself because you're too proud to accept help. It's... He stopped, searching for the right words. Elena, I know this is complicated. I know there's history between us that we haven't dealt with. But right now those girls need stability. They need food and warmth and someone who gives a damn whether they live or die. You can give them that, but not here. Not alone. And what about Walter? When he comes back, if he comes back, we'll deal with it. But I'm not going to let you and those children freeze or starve while we wait for a man who's already abandoned you. Elena turned away from him, her hands gripping the porch railing. You don't understand what you're asking. If I leave this house, if I go with you, people will assume things. They'll say let them say it. Easy for you to say. You're a man. Your reputation survives scandal. Mine doesn't. She was right, and they both knew it. A woman who left her husband's home to live with another man, even with the best intentions, would be marked as damaged goods. It didn't matter that Walter had abandoned her first. It didn't matter that she was starving. Society had rules, and women who broke them paid the price. Then what do you want to do? Caleb asked quietly. Stay here and hope Walter develops a conscience? Try to make it through the rest of winter on half a sack of flour and prayers? I don't know. The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. I don't know what to do. Every choice I have is wrong. If I stay, the girls suffer. If I leave, my reputation is destroyed and I have even fewer options than before. There's no good answer. Caleb watched her struggle with it, watched the fear and frustration war across her face. Then he made a decision. Come to my ranch, he said, temporarily. Just until spring. Until Walter comes back or we figure out what else to do. I'll sleep in the barn. You and the girls take the house. We'll be proper about it. Get Pete to stay there too as a chaperone if we have to. But Elena... He stepped closer. I'm not leaving you here to die. I can't. So either you come with me willingly, or I start carrying children out to my wagon, and you can explain to them why you'd rather preserve your reputation than accept help. Her eyes flashed. That's not fair. No, it's not. But neither is any of this. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The wind picked up, moaning through the broken eaves. Inside, one of the girls coughed in her sleep. Elena's shoulders sagged. 1 month, she said finally. Just until Lily's fully recovered and the weather breaks. Then I'll figure out something else. Fine. 1 month. And you sleep in the barn. Agreed. And we tell everyone the truth, that you're helping us temporarily because Walter had to go away on business. Caleb didn't point out that Walter had stolen their money and abandoned them. If that's what you want to tell people, it's not about what I want. It's about what people will believe. She looked at him, her expression desperate. I need them to believe it, Caleb. Because if they don't, if they think there's something between us, then even if Walter never comes back, I'll never be able to remarry. No decent man would take a woman with that kind of reputation. The words hit him like a fist to the gut. Because underneath everything she was saying, there was a truth she wasn't speaking. She was already planning for a future without him. She was accepting his help because she had no choice, but she was drawing clear lines. This was temporary. This was practical. This was not about them. Understood, he said, his voice flat. I'll bring the wagon around tomorrow morning. Pack what you need. He turned to go back inside, but her hand caught his sleeve. Caleb. She looked up at him, and for a moment her mask slipped. He saw past the exhaustion and fear to something softer underneath. I know this is hard. I know I'm asking a lot, putting conditions on your kindness, but I need you to understand. I can't afford to hope for things that aren't real. I've been disappointed too many times. I'm not trying to disappoint you. I know, but we can't. This can't be about us. It has to be about the girls. That's all I can handle right now. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that it was already about them, that it had always been about them, that pretending otherwise wasn't going to change the truth. But looking at her worn face, at the desperation in her eyes, he realized she was right. She'd been through too much, lost too much. She couldn't afford to risk her heart on a man who'd already let her down once before, even if that man would rather die than let her down again. All right, he said quietly, just about the girls. I can do that. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but he told it anyway, because sometimes love meant giving people what they needed, even when it wasn't what you wanted. Elena nodded, relief and something else, regret, maybe, flickering across her face. Then she went back inside, leaving Caleb alone on the porch, with the wind and the dark, and the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. He stood there for a long time, staring out at nothing. Tomorrow, they'd pack up. Tomorrow he'd bring Elena and the girls to his ranch, where they'd be safe and fed and warm. Tomorrow he'd start pretending that this was just charity, just practical help between old friends. Tomorrow he'd start lying to everyone, including himself. But tonight, just for tonight, he let himself admit the truth. He was still in love with Elena Moore. He'd probably always been in love with her. And if helping her meant watching her plan a future with someone else, if it meant sleeping in a barn and keeping his distance and pretending his heart wasn't breaking every time she looked at him with gratitude instead of love, well, he'd survived worse. Probably. The move happened quietly before dawn, when the only witnesses were the stars and Pete's knowing silence. Caleb loaded the wagon while Elena bundled the girls in every blanket they owned. Lily was still weak, her face pale against the dark wool, but her eyes were clear. That counted for something. Sarah climbed into the wagon bed without a word, settling herself protectively beside her sister. She'd packed their belongings in a flour sack, 2 dresses, a rag doll, their mother's hairbrush. Everything they owned in the world fit in a bag no bigger than a loaf of bread. Elena took one last look at the homestead, her face unreadable in the gray pre-dawn light. Caleb wondered what she saw, failure or escape, or just another in a long line of places that hadn't worked out. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded without speaking and climbed up onto the wagon seat. They left the Kemmer place behind as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the frozen prairie in shades of gold and pink that were too beautiful for how desperate everything felt. The ride to Caleb's ranch took 3 hours. The girls fell asleep in the back, huddled together for warmth. Elena sat rigid beside him, her hands clasped tight in her lap, staring at nothing. "You all right?" Caleb asked when they were halfway there. "I left," she said, her voice hollow. "I left my husband's house. Even if he abandoned us first, even if he took everything, I still left. That makes me... It makes you smart. It makes me divorced in everything but name." She finally looked at him. "Do you understand what that means? I'll never be respectable again, never be able to hold my head up in town, never be able to..." Her voice cracked. "I've ruined everything." "You saved those girls." "Maybe. Or maybe I've just delayed the inevitable." She turned away again. "Walter will come back eventually. Men like him always do. And when he does, he'll have the law on his side. I'm his wife. Those are his children. He can take them away from me whenever he wants." The thought made Caleb's hands tighten on the reins hard enough that his knuckles went white. "I won't let that happen." "You can't stop it. The law doesn't care about what's right. It cares about what's legal." She was right, and they both knew it. A man's rights over his wife and children were absolute, backed by courts and custom and centuries of precedent. Unless Walter was proven unfit, and even then, even with witnesses and evidence, He could claim his family, and there wasn't a damn thing anyone could do about it. Unless the idea that had been forming in the back of Caleb's mind for days suddenly crystallized into something sharp and clear and probably insane. What if you weren't his wife anymore? He asked slowly. Elena's head snapped toward him. What? What if, hypothetically, you were married to someone else, someone who could legally adopt the girls, give them his name and protection? She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Caleb, I'm already married. To a man who abandoned you. A man who hasn't been seen in weeks, who took your money and left you to starve. There are laws about that. Grounds for annulment, or it takes years to get an annulment, and money I don't have, and proof that Walter won't contest. She shook her head. Even if I could, even if it were possible, why would I marry again? So I can hand control of my life to another man who might decide to leave when things get hard? I wouldn't leave. The words hung between them, weighted with 19 years of history. Elena's face went pale. Don't. I'm serious. If you needed protection, a legal way to keep the girls safe, stop talking. Her voice was sharp. Just stop. We had this conversation yesterday. This arrangement is temporary. It's practical. We're not. She pressed her hands over her face. I can't think about this right now. Caleb bit back everything else he wanted to say. She was right. They'd barely survived the last week. Elena was exhausted. The girls were still recovering, and he was talking about marriage like it was a solution instead of another complication in an already impossible situation. Sorry, he muttered. Forget I said anything. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Caleb's ranch appeared over a rise just before noon, a solid 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a barn that didn't sag, outbuildings that looked like they'd been built by someone who knew what he was doing, fences that were actually straight, land that rolled out green and endless under the winter sky. Sarah sat up in the wagon bed, her eyes going wide. Is that where we're going? That's home, Caleb said, then caught himself. I mean, that's my place. Where you'll be staying. It's big, Lily whispered, her voice still raspy from being sick. Big enough. He pulled the wagon up to the front porch, where Pete was waiting, arms crossed, expression skeptical. So you actually did it, Pete said, eyeing the wagon's occupants. Brought home strays. Pete, Caleb warned, I'm just saying, boss, you know what people are going to think. I know. I don't care. Pete grunted, unconvinced, but he came forward to help Elena down from the wagon. She took his offered hand stiffly, her back straight, her chin up, trying to look like a woman who hadn't just lost everything. Ma'am, Pete said, tipping his hat. I'm Pete Holloway. I work for Caleb, live in the bunkhouse out back. I'll try to stay out of your way. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Just Pete. He glanced at Caleb. I cleaned out the upstairs like you asked. Put fresh linens on the bed, stocked the kitchen. Should be enough to get you through a few days. Appreciate it. Pete nodded and headed back toward the barn, leaving them standing in awkward silence. Caleb lifted Lily down from the wagon, surprised by how light she was. The girl looked up at him with solemn eyes and said, Is this really where we're staying? For now. It's nicer than Papa's house. Yeah, well, most places are. He set her down gently, then helped Sarah climb out. Come on, let's get you all inside before you freeze. The house was warm. That was the first thing Elena noticed. Actual warmth, radiating from a big iron stove in the kitchen and a fireplace in the main room. She stood in the entryway, taking it in. Clean floors, windows with real glass, furniture that wasn't falling apart. It's not fancy, Caleb said, misreading her silence for disappointment. But it's solid. Keeps the weather out. It's beautiful, Elena said quietly. Sarah and Lily were already exploring, their thin faces bright with cautious wonder. They'd never seen a house this nice, Caleb realized. Walter's homestead had been a hovel. Before that, who knew what kind of places they'd lived in? Second floor's got 3 bedrooms, he told Elena. You and the girls can take whichever ones you want. There's a washroom at the end of the hall, indoor plumbing, so you don't have to haul water from the well. Elena just stared at him. What? You have indoor plumbing? Yeah. Put it in 2 years ago. Cost a fortune, but it's worth it in winter. He studied her face. Elena, how bad was it? At Walter's place? She didn't answer directly. We hauled water from a well 100 yards from the house. In buckets, the well froze twice this winter. We melted snow for drinking water. Her voice was flat, factual. The girls had chilblains on their feet from the cold. We burned furniture for heat when the firewood ran out. So yes, Caleb, this is like a palace. He felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. Where the hell was Walter while all this was happening? Drinking, or gone, or both. She turned away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. It doesn't matter now. It mattered. It mattered so much that Caleb had to clench his fists to keep from putting them through a wall. But Elena was right. Dwelling on Walter's failures wouldn't change anything. I'll show you the bedrooms, he said instead. Get you settled. The girls chose rooms at the end of the hall, wanting to be close together. Elena took the one in the middle, a small space with a window overlooking the south pasture. She stood at that window for a long time, looking out at land that went on forever. What happens now? She asked without turning around. Caleb, standing in the doorway, considered lying, considered telling her everything would work out fine, that Walter would stay gone, that they could all just pretend this was normal. I don't know, he said instead, but we'll figure it out. She nodded slowly. The girls need routine, structure. They've been through too much chaos. Agreed. I can help around the house, cooking, cleaning. I'm not going to just... I need to contribute something. Elena, you don't have to... Yes, I do. She finally turned to face him. I'm not a charity case. If I'm going to stay here, even temporarily, I need to feel like I'm earning my keep. Otherwise I'll... Her voice caught. I'll fall apart. Do you understand? He understood. Understood that she was barely holding herself together, that pride was sometimes the only thing that kept people upright when everything else failed. All right, you want to help? You can help. But you're also going to rest and eat proper meals and let yourself recover. Deal? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Deal. The first week passed in careful politeness. Elena and the girls settled into the house like cautious guests, touching things gently, speaking in quiet voices. Caleb kept his distance, sleeping in the barn like he'd promised, coming in only for meals and to check that everything was all right. Pete watched it all with sardonic amusement. You two are dancing around each other like strangers at a church social. We are strangers, Caleb said, mending a bridle in the barn. 19 years apart will do that. Horseshit. You look at that woman like she hung the moon. Drop it, Pete. I'm just saying, if you're going to ruin your reputation bringing a married woman into your house, you might as well get something out of it besides frostbite from sleeping in the barn. Caleb's hand stilled on the leather. It's not like that. Then what's it like? It's complicated. Everything's complicated with you. Pete shook his head. Just don't wait so long to figure it out that you lose her again. The words hit harder than they should have. That night, Caleb was drifting off in the barn loft when he heard hoofbeats. Fast, urgent. He was on his feet with his rifle in hand before his brain fully caught up. A horse thundered into the yard, the rider pulling up hard. Caleb recognized him, Tom Briggs, the sheriff, and the look on his face said this wasn't a social call. Caleb! Tom swung down from his horse. Where's the woman? Ice flooded Caleb's veins. What happened? Walter Kemmer's back, drunk as hell and mean with it. He showed up at the homestead an hour ago, found it empty, and went on a tear in town asking where his wife ran off to. Christ. Someone told him she was here. He's coming, Caleb, and he's got his brother with him. You know Louis Kemmer? Big bastard, mean as a snake? Tom's face was grim. They're both armed and talking about taking back what's theirs. Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. Those girls aren't property. Try telling that to Walter. As far as the law is concerned, his wife and kids belong to him. Tom held up a hand. I'm not saying I agree. I'm saying that's reality. If he wants to take them, I can't stop him. Not legally. Then I will. Caleb, don't be stupid. You can't shoot a man for claiming his own family. Watch me. Listen to me. Tom grabbed his arm. Walter's got rights. You don't. You pull a gun on him, you're the one going to jail. And then where does that leave the woman and those girls? Caleb knew he was right. Hated it, but knew it. So what do I do? He asked, his voice rough. Just hand them over? Let him drag Elena and those children back to that hellhole? I'm saying be smart about this. Stall. Talk. Give me time to... Tom paused. Hell, I don't know. But violence isn't the answer. The sound of more horses interrupted them. Caleb looked toward the road and saw them coming, 2 riders, moving fast through the darkness. Tom swore under his breath. They're already here. Elena appeared on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, her face pale. Caleb, what's happening? Get inside, lock the doors. Is it Walter? The riders came into the yard, horses blowing hard. Walter Kemmer looked worse than Caleb remembered, thinner, wilder, eyes bloodshot and mean. His brother Louis was built like a bull, all shoulders and rage. Walter's gaze locked on Elena. There you are, you ungrateful bitch. Elena flinched but held her ground. Walter. Don't you Walter me. He swung down from his horse, stumbling slightly. Drunk, just like Tom said. You abandoned our home, took my children. Who the hell gave you permission to do that? You left us. Elena's voice shook but didn't break. You took all our money and disappeared for 3 weeks. The girls were starving. So you ran to him? Walter gestured at Caleb with contempt. Shacked up with your old lover like the whore you are? Caleb moved before he could think, putting himself between Walter and Elena. Watch your mouth. Or what? Walter's laugh was ugly. You'll shoot me? In front of the sheriff? He glanced at Tom. Tell him, Briggs. Tell him he's got no legal leg to stand on. Tom's face was tight with frustration. Caleb, step back. Listen to the sheriff, boy. Louis Kemmer moved his horse closer, one hand resting on the gun at his hip. This ain't your fight. It is if I'm making it my fight. Caleb, Elena said quietly from behind him. Don't. But he couldn't stop. Couldn't stand there and watch Walter take her and the girls back to that broken-down homestead, back to hunger and fear and whatever other hell Walter had planned. Those girls are sick, Caleb said, keeping his voice level. One of them nearly died last week. They need rest, proper food. You can't take care of them. They're my daughters. I'll raise them how I see fit. Walter's eyes narrowed. And my wife's coming with me. Right now. Unless you want trouble. The only trouble here is you. Caleb's hand moved toward his gun. You're drunk, you're broke, and you've got no business being around children. I got every business. I'm their father. You're a drunk and a coward. Walter's face went purple with rage. He reached for his own gun. Stop! Elena's voice cracked like a whip. She pushed past Caleb, stepping into the space between them. Just stop. Both of you. Elena, get back inside, Caleb said. No. She turned to Walter, and Caleb could see her trembling, but her voice was steady. You want me to come back? Fine. I'll come back. Just leave Caleb alone. Like hell you will, Caleb started, but she cut him off with a look. This isn't your decision. She turned back to Walter. I'll go with you, on one condition. Walter's eyes narrowed with suspicion. What condition? The girls stay here for 2 more weeks, until Lily's fully recovered. Then we'll all come back. I give you my word. Your word ain't worth shit. It's all I have to offer. Elena's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. You want a wife? Fine. I'll be your wife. But those girls need medical care. You saw how sick Lily was. She needs time to heal. Walter considered this, swaying slightly. 2 weeks? 2 weeks? Then I'll come back and we'll work this out. Like a proper family. The lie was so obvious that Caleb wanted to scream, but Walter, drunk and mean and stupid, actually seemed to be considering it. How do I know you won't run? Walter asked. Elena met his eyes. Because I'm giving you my word. And because, her voice dropped, because I don't have anywhere else to go. The defeat in her voice was so genuine that even Caleb almost believed it. Walter looked at Caleb, then at Tom, then back at Elena. Finally, he nodded. 2 weeks, but you're coming with me now, tonight. No, Caleb said flatly. It's all right, Elena said, still not looking at him. I'll go. Elena, Caleb. She finally turned to face him, and the look in her eyes stopped the words in his throat. Let me do this, please. She was asking him to trust her, to believe she had a plan, even though they both knew she was walking into a trap. Every instinct Caleb had screamed at him to refuse, to pull his gun, to fight, to do something other than stand there like a useless idiot while the woman he loved walked back into hell. But if he fought, if he tried to keep Elena by force, he'd be the criminal. Walter would have the law on his side. Elena and the girls would be taken anyway, and Caleb would be in jail or worse. 2 weeks, he said finally, the words tasting like poison. And if she's not back here with the girls by then, I'm coming for you, law or no law. Walter's grin was vicious. Looking forward to it. Elena walked toward Walter's horse like she was walking to her own execution. She didn't look back at Caleb, didn't say goodbye to the girls, who were watching from an upstairs window with identical expressions of terror. Walter hauled her up onto his horse like a sack of grain. She settled behind him stiffly, her face blank. 2 weeks, Walter called out. Then I want my daughters back. You keep them 1 day longer. I'll have the law down on you so fast. Get out of my yard, Caleb said quietly. Walter laughed and spurred his horse. Lewis followed, and just like that, they were gone, disappearing into the darkness with Elena between them. The yard fell silent. Tom let out a long breath. That went better than I expected. Better? Caleb turned on him. He just took her. She went willingly. That's the difference. Tom rubbed his face. Look, I know this is hard, but she bought you time, 2 weeks to figure out something better than a gunfight. There's nothing to figure out. Walter's not giving up those girls, and Elena, his chest felt too tight. She's going back to that place, alone, with him. What do you want me to say, Caleb? That you should have shot him? That would have solved everything? Maybe it would have. No, it would have made you a murderer and left Elena and those girls with nobody. Tom mounted his horse. Use the 2 weeks. Talk to a lawyer. Find a legal way to help them. Because going off half-cocked with a gun is just going to get people killed. He rode off, leaving Caleb standing in the dark yard with rage and helplessness churning in his gut. The front door opened. Sarah stood there in her nightgown, her face streaked with tears. Is Miss Elena coming back? Caleb couldn't lie to her. I don't know, sweetheart. Papa's going to hurt her. No, he won't. I won't let him. You said that before. Sarah's voice was small, broken. You said you'd keep us safe, but he took her anyway. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Because she was right, he'd failed, made promises he couldn't keep, let Elena walk into danger because he didn't have the guts to fight the law. I'm going to fix this, he told Sarah. I swear to you, I'm going to bring her back. How? That was the question, wasn't it? Caleb spent the rest of the night pacing the barn, his mind racing through possibilities. Fight Walter. But that meant jail, or worse. Go to a judge. But what judge would rule against a man's right to his own family? Sneak Elena out in the middle of the night. But Walter would just come after them again, and next time he'd bring more than his brother. By dawn, he'd made a decision. It was probably the craziest thing he'd ever considered. It was definitely illegal in about 6 different ways, but it was the only plan he had that might actually work. He found Pete in the barn forking hay. I need your help with something. Pete looked at him warily. What kind of something? The illegal kind. Ah, hell. I knew this was coming. Pete set down the pitchfork. What are we doing? I'm going to marry Elena. Silence. Then Pete started laughing. You're insane. Probably, but hear me out. Caleb paced the barn, words tumbling out fast. Elena's married to Walter. That gives him legal rights. But what if she wasn't married to him? What if there was a way to end that marriage fast, without years of legal wrangling? There isn't. There is if Walter's dead. Pete stopped laughing. Caleb, not actually dead, just legally dead, declared dead by a court. You can't just declare someone dead because it's convenient. You can if they've been missing long enough. If there's no trace of them, if they've abandoned their family. Caleb was grasping at straws, and he knew it. There has to be a way. Even if there was, it takes time. Years, probably. You don't have years, you have 2 weeks. Then I'll do it another way. Caleb stopped pacing, a new idea forming. What if Elena and I got married? Right now, today. She's already married, you idiot. Not if we find a preacher who doesn't know that. Pete stared at him. You want to commit fraud. I want to protect Elena and those girls. If she's married to me, legally married, with papers and witnesses, Then Walter can't touch her, can't claim her as his wife, can't take the girls. That's not how it works. Her first marriage would still be valid. Yours would be the fraud. Only if someone proves it. And who's going to prove it? Walter? He'd have to admit he abandoned his family. Caleb's mind was racing now, piecing together a plan that was half desperation and half brilliance. We get married quietly. Don't tell anyone except people we trust. By the time Walter figures it out, we've got legal protections in place. Adoption papers for the girls, property rights, everything tied up so tight he can't unravel it without a fight. This is insane, Pete said again. You have a better idea? Pete opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head slowly. You're really going to do this? If Elena agrees, yes. And if she doesn't? That was the question that kept Caleb up at night, because Elena had made it clear, painfully clear, that she didn't want his help if it came with strings attached, that she was planning a future without him. But that was before Walter came back, before she sacrificed herself to buy time for the girls. Now, everything had changed. I'm going to ask her, Caleb said. Tonight, before I lose my nerve. Tonight, she's at Walter's place. With Walter. Then I'll go get her. That's kidnapping? That's rescue. Caleb grabbed his coat. You with me or not? Pete sighed, the sigh of a man who knew he was making a terrible decision. I'm with you. But when this all goes to hell, I'm saying I told you so. Fair enough. They rode out an hour later, after dark, moving quiet through the prairie night. The Kemmer homestead appeared like a broken shadow against the stars. No lights, no movement. Too quiet. Caleb's gut clenched with bad feeling. He dismounted 100 yards out, moving the rest of the way on foot with Pete behind him. The front door was hanging open. Caleb's hand went to his gun. He stepped inside, eyes adjusting to the darkness. The house was a wreck, furniture overturned, broken glass, the sharp smell of spilled whiskey. And there, huddled in the corner by the cold stove, was Elena. She looked up when she heard him, and Caleb's heart stopped. Her lip was split. A bruise was already darkening on her cheek. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Caleb, she whispered, you shouldn't be here. He was across the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees beside her. What did he do? It doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't. He touched her face gently, rage burning so hot in his chest he could barely breathe. Where is he? Gone. He and Lewis went into town an hour ago. Her voice was dull, exhausted. They'll be back soon. You need to leave before... I'm not leaving without you. Caleb, Elena, listen to me. He took her hands, felt them shaking. I have a plan. It's crazy and probably illegal, but it's the only way I can think of to keep you safe. She stared at him with those bruised eyes. What plan? Marry me. The words dropped into the silence like stones into water. Elena's face went blank with shock. What? Marry me. Tonight. Right now. Before Walter gets back. I'm already married. To a man who just beat you and left you alone in a freezing house. That doesn't sound like a marriage worth keeping. It's still legal. I can't just... We'll figure out the legalities later. Right now, what matters is getting you out of here and giving you legal protection. Caleb gripped her hands tighter. If you're married to me, Walter can't claim you, can't force you back here. We file adoption papers for the girls, make them legally mine, ours, and he loses all rights. That's fraud. Probably. But it's also survival. He searched her face. Elena, I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you were planning to find someone else eventually, someone respectable. But right now you need help. And I'm offering it. No strings, no expectations, just legal protection and a safe place to live. She pulled her hands away, pressing them to her face. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust me, one more time. And if it goes wrong, if Walter fights back, if the law sides with him, then I've committed bigamy, and you've committed fraud, and we both end up... We won't. Caleb's voice was steady, certain. I'll make sure we don't. But Elena, you can't stay here, even for 2 more weeks. Look at yourself. She touched her split lip, wincing. He was drunk. It won't happen again. Yes, it will. Next time he gets drunk, next time money runs short, next time something pisses him off, it'll happen again and again. Until... He couldn't finish the sentence. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said very softly, "What about the girls?" "They come with us. Tonight. All of us leave together. Walter will come after us." "Let him. By the time he figures out what happened, you'll be legally married to me. He'll have no claim." "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. It's messy and complicated and probably going to blow up in our faces. But it's better than the alternative." Caleb leaned closer. "Elena, I'm not going to stand by and watch him destroy you. I won't do it. So either you come with me now, or I'm dragging you out of here by force and dealing with the consequences later." A ghost of a smile crossed her battered face. "That's kidnapping. That's love." The word hung between them, naked and raw. Elena's breath caught. "Caleb, I know you don't feel the same way. I know this is practical for you, survival. But I need you to understand why I'm doing this. It's not charity. It's not pity." He took her hands again, held them tight. "It's because I've loved you for 19 years, and I'm not letting you go again, not without a fight." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's not fair." "No, but it's true." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "If we do this, if I say yes, it can't be real. You understand? It's legal protection. Nothing more." The words hurt more than they should have, but Caleb nodded. "Whatever you need it to be. And if I want to end it someday, if I want to leave, then you leave. No questions asked." She studied his face like she was trying to find the lie. But there wasn't one. Caleb meant every word. Finally, she nodded. "All right, let's do it." Relief and terror hit him in equal measure. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm out of other options." She stood, wincing as bruised muscles protested. "How do we even do this? We can't exactly walk into a church and—" "Pete knows a preacher. Out near Eldridge. Man who doesn't ask too many questions." "Convenient." "Yeah, well, Pete's got friends in low places." Caleb helped her to her feet. "Can you ride?" "I'll manage." They left the Kemmer homestead for the second time, and Caleb knew, they both knew, this time there was no going back. The preacher's house sat at the end of a rutted road outside Eldridge, a small structure that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare lumber and stubborn faith. A single lamp burned in the window, the only light for miles. Pete knocked 3 times, a specific rhythm. The door opened a crack, revealing a weathered face and suspicious eyes. "Pete Holloway," the preacher said, his voice rough from disuse. "Didn't expect to see you again. Thought you swore off religion after that business in Abilene." "Still have, but I need a favor, Reverend." "Favors cost money." "I've got money." Pete stepped aside, revealing Caleb and Elena standing in the shadows. "These two need marrying, tonight. No questions." The preacher's gaze moved to Elena's bruised face, then to Caleb's set jaw. Something shifted in his expression, not quite sympathy, but understanding. "She running from something?" he asked. "Someone," Caleb said flatly. "And you're the solution?" "I'm what she's got." The preacher studied them both for a long moment. Then he opened the door wider. "Come in, but this is going to cost you double my usual rate." "Done." Inside the house smelled like old paper and lamp oil. The preacher, Reverend Marcus, Pete called him, shuffled to a small desk and pulled out a leather-bound book and a marriage certificate that had seen better days. "Names," he said, dipping a pen in ink. "Caleb Dawson." "Elena." She hesitated, and Caleb saw the moment she made the choice. Elena Moore. Not Kemmer. She was already erasing Walter from her life, one word at a time. The Reverend wrote it down without comment. "Witnesses." "Me," Pete said. "Need 2. I'll wake my wife." Marcus disappeared into the back room, returning a moment later with a sleepy woman in a nightgown who looked at Elena's face and asked no questions. The ceremony itself took less than 5 minutes. There was no music, no flowers, no pretense that this was anything but a transaction. Marcus read the words from his book in a monotone, like he'd said them 1,000 times before. Elena's hand shook when she took Caleb's. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "I do." Caleb's voice was steady. He'd waited 19 years for this moment, even if it was happening in a preacher's shabby front room with a woman who didn't love him back. "I do," he said, and meant it with everything he had. Marcus handed them the certificate. Far as the law is concerned, you're married, but son, he looked at Caleb with eyes that had seen too much. If this woman's running from her husband, that first marriage is still valid. You know that, right? We'll handle it. You better. Because when he comes looking, and men like that always come looking, this piece of paper won't protect you. It'll just give him more ammunition. Let him come. Marcus shook his head. On your head, then. Now get out. I don't want trouble finding its way to my door. They left with the marriage certificate folded in Caleb's pocket, and Elena's hand still trembling in his. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Elena sat in front of Caleb on his horse, her back stiff, not leaning into him even when exhaustion made her sway. Pete rode ahead, giving them space. You all right? Caleb asked quietly when they were halfway home. No. At least she was honest. I know this isn't what you wanted, he said. What I wanted doesn't seem to matter much anymore. Her voice was hollow. I wanted a simple life. A husband who wouldn't leave. Children to raise. Instead, I got Walter and poverty, and now, this. This doesn't have to be permanent. Like you said, if you want out. And go where? Do what? She laughed, bitter. I'm a woman with 2 failed marriages and no prospects. Even if we somehow make this legal, even if Walter just disappears, who's going to take me after this? I'm ruined, Caleb, completely ruined. You're alive. That counts for something. Does it? They rode in silence after that. Sarah and Lily were asleep when they arrived at the ranch, curled together in the bigger bedroom. Caleb carried Elena inside while Pete tended the horses. She'd fallen asleep on the ride, exhaustion finally winning over fear. He laid her on the bed in her room, pulled off her boots, covered her with a quilt. She didn't wake. In sleep, with the tension gone from her face, she looked younger. More like the girl he remembered. The bruise on her cheek looked worse in the lamplight. Caleb stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe, and made himself a promise. Walter Kemmer would never touch her again. Whatever it took, whatever laws he had to break, whatever fights he had to finish, Walter was done. He left her sleeping and went to find Pete in the barn. Well, Pete said, forking hay into a stall, you did it. You're a married man. How's it feel? Like I just stepped off a cliff. Accurate. Pete leaned on the pitchfork. So what now? You got yourself a wife who doesn't love you, 2 kids who aren't yours, and a drunk with a mean streak who's going to come after you with everything he's got. What's the plan? Legal protection. I'm riding into town tomorrow to file the marriage certificate and start adoption papers for the girls. That's going to raise questions. Let it. By the time anyone figures out what's happening, it'll be too late to stop. And if Walter goes to the law, claims you stole his wife, then I produce the marriage certificate and dare him to prove it's not legitimate. Caleb's jaw set. We just need to move fast. Get everything filed before he realizes what we've done. Pete shook his head slowly. You're either the bravest man I know or the dumbest. Probably both. Morning came too fast. Caleb was up before dawn, heading into town with the marriage certificate and a pocket full of determination. The county clerk was a pinch-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson, who looked at the certificate like it might bite her. This is dated yesterday, she said. That's when we got married. I don't recall seeing a notice posted. It was private. Her lips thinned. Where's the bride? I'll need to verify her signature. She's at home, recovering from an illness. How convenient. Mrs. Henderson's eyes were sharp. Mr. Dawson, I've been filing marriage certificates in this county for 20 years. I know when something doesn't smell right. Are you refusing to file it? I'm asking questions. And I'm answering them. The marriage is legal. The certificate is signed by Reverend Marcus out in Eldridge. Everything's in order. Except the bride isn't here to confirm it. Caleb leaned forward, keeping his voice level. Mrs. Henderson, my wife was beaten by her previous husband. She's recovering. If you want to drag her down here to satisfy your curiosity, I can arrange that. But I promise you, the bruises on her face are going to raise more questions than this certificate. Something flickered in the woman's expression. Not quite sympathy, but close. Previous husband? She repeated slowly. She was widowed. The lie came easily. Too easily. Her first husband died 5 years ago. left her with nothing. I see. Mrs. Henderson picked up her pen. And the groom's occupation? Rancher. She wrote it down, her movements precise. Then she stamped the certificate with more force than necessary and handed Caleb a copy. Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Dawson. I hope it works out better than you deserve. Caleb took the certificate without responding. He had what he needed. Next stop was the lawyer's office. Jonathan Pierce was a young man, ambitious and hungry, the kind of lawyer who'd take a case if there was money in it. He listened to Caleb's request, adoption papers for 2 minor children, with increasing interest. These children, Pierce said, they're your wife's from a previous marriage? Her husband abandoned them, left them to starve. My wife and I want to make them legally ours. I'll need documentation, proof of abandonment, statements from witnesses. I can get that. And the biological father will need to sign away his parental rights. Caleb's jaw tightened. What if he refuses? Then we go to court, prove he's an unfit parent. It's messy, takes time, and there's no guarantee you'll win. Pierce leaned back in his chair. Mr. Dawson, I'll be frank with you. Adoption cases involving contested custody rarely end well for the adoptive parents, especially when the biological father is still alive and asserting his rights. Even if he's a drunk who beat his wife and neglected his children? Even then, the courts favor keeping children with their blood relatives unless there's overwhelming evidence of harm. Pierce tapped his pen against the desk. How much harm are we talking about? Caleb thought about Sarah's too thin face, Lily's near death from fever, Elena's split lip. Enough, he said quietly. Get me documentation. Sworn statements from anyone who witnessed the neglect or abuse. Medical records if you have them. Build me a case I can take to a judge, and I'll do my best. Pierce's expression was serious. But understand, this is going to be a fight, and fights cost money. I've got money. Then we have a deal. Caleb left the lawyer's office with a sick feeling in his gut. Documentation, witnesses, evidence, all things that took time they didn't have. He was halfway back to his horse when he heard a familiar voice. Caleb Dawson, fancy meeting you here? Sheriff Tom Briggs stood in the street, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Caleb's hand moved instinctively toward his gun before he stopped himself. Tom, heard an interesting rumor this morning, something about you getting married. Tom's eyes were sharp. That true? It's true. To Elena Moore, the same woman who was married to Walter Kemmer 2 days ago? She's Elena Dawson now. Tom's face hardened. You stupid son of a bitch. You actually did it. You married another man's wife. She's not his wife anymore. She's mine. That's not how the law works, and you know it. Tom stepped closer, lowering his voice. Caleb, what the hell were you thinking? When Walter finds out, let him find out. I've got a legal marriage certificate, filed this morning with the county clerk. A marriage certificate obtained through fraud. Her first marriage is still valid. You know that, right? This doesn't protect her. It just makes you complicit. In what? Protecting a woman from an abusive husband? In bigamy? In kidnapping? If Walter decides to press charges? In... Tom broke off, rubbing his face. I'm trying to help you here, but you're making it damn near impossible. I don't need your help. I need you to stay out of my way. Can't do that. Not when you're breaking the law right in front of me. Tom's voice was hard now. Where are the Kemmer girls? At my ranch. Safe. Walter's got a legal right to those children. Walter abandoned them, left them to starve while he drank away what little money they had. He's got no rights. That's for a court to decide, not you. Tom moved his hand to the gun at his hip. Bring the girls back, Caleb, before this gets worse. No, that wasn't a request, and I wasn't asking permission. Caleb faced him down, his voice deadly quiet. Those girls aren't going back to that hellhole. Elena's not going back. I don't care what the law says. I don't care if you throw me in jail. They're staying with me. Then you're under arrest. For what? Interference with parental custody. Fraud. Take your pick. Caleb's hand went to his gun. You really want to do this, Tom? Don't make this worse than it already is. It's already as bad as it gets. You want to arrest me? Fine. But those girls are staying where they are, and Elena's not going back to Walter. You'll have to shoot me to change that. They stood there in the middle of the street, hands on their guns, while townspeople started to gather and whisper. The tension stretched so tight Caleb could feel it humming in the air. Then a new voice cut through the silence. "Tom Briggs, you put that gun away right now." Both men turned. Mrs. Henderson stood on the steps of the county clerk's office, her face set in lines of determination. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you," Tom said. "Like hell it doesn't. I just filed Mr. Dawson's marriage certificate. Legal and binding. If you're planning to arrest him for protecting his wife, you'll have to explain to Judge Morrison why you're interfering with a lawful marriage. The woman's already married to a man who abandoned her, left her with 2 starving children and a house falling down around her ears." Mrs. Henderson came down the steps, her small frame vibrating with righteous anger. "I've seen Elena Dawson's face, Sheriff. I know what Walter Kemmer did to her. And if you think I'm going to stand by while you force her back into that situation, you've got another think coming." Tom's face reddened. "Mrs. Henderson, with all due respect, don't you with all due respect me, Tom Briggs. I knew you when you were in short pants." She turned to the growing crowd. "Walter Kemmer is a drunk and a wife-beater. Everyone in this town knows it. We've all looked the other way because it wasn't our business. Well, it's our business now. And I, for one, am not going to let that man destroy another family." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing, some scandalized, all fascinated. Tom looked around, realizing he'd lost control of the situation. "This is a legal matter. Then take it to a judge. Let Judge Morrison decide if Mr. Dawson's marriage is valid." Mrs. Henderson crossed her arms. "But until then, you leave him alone." Tom's jaw worked, then he stepped back, his hand leaving his gun. "This isn't over, Caleb." "Never thought it was." The sheriff walked away, the crowd parting for him. Mrs. Henderson waited until he was gone, then turned to Caleb. "You owe me," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am. I mean it. I just put my reputation on the line for you. Don't make me regret it." "I won't." She studied his face. "You really love her, or is this just about saving her?" Caleb met her eyes. "Both." Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. "Then you better fight like hell, because Walter Kemmer's not going to let this go. And when he comes back, and he will come back, you're going to need more than a marriage certificate to protect her." She was right. Caleb knew it, felt it in his bones. The fight was just beginning. He rode back to the ranch to find chaos. Walter's brother Lewis was there, along with 2 other men Caleb didn't recognize. They had Elena cornered on the porch, Sarah and Lily hiding behind her skirts. "There he is," Lewis called out when he saw Caleb. "The man who thinks he can steal another man's wife." Caleb dismounted slowly, his hand near his gun. "Get off my property." "Your property?" Lewis laughed. "That's Walter's wife you got there. Those are his children. We're here to take them back. Elena's my wife now. Married her last night. Got the papers to prove it." That stopped Lewis cold. "The hell you did." "Check with the county clerk if you don't believe me." Caleb moved toward the porch, positioning himself between the men and Elena. "Now get off my land before I make you." "You can't just marry her. She's already married." "To a man who abandoned her and beat her and left her to die. That marriage is done." "That's not how it works." Lewis's face was purple with rage. "Walter's got rights." "Walter's got nothing, and you've got about 10 seconds to leave before I start shooting." One of the other men shifted nervously. "Lewis, maybe we should—" "Shut up." Lewis's hand went to his gun. "You think you can threaten me on your own property?" "I'm not threatening, I'm promising." Caleb's voice was deadly calm. "You've got 5 seconds, then things get messy." Behind him, he heard Elena's sharp intake of breath. The girls were crying, quiet and scared. Lewis looked at Caleb, at the gun on his hip, at the cold certainty in his face. Then he spat in the dirt. "This isn't over. When Walter hears what you've done, tell Walter he's welcome to try to take them back. I'll be waiting." Lewis and his men mounted up, throwing threats over their shoulders as they rode off. Caleb stood there until they were out of sight, his heart hammering against his ribs. Then Elena's hand touched his arm. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. "Done what?" "Threatened them. Now they'll go straight to Walter. Tell him everything." "Good. Let him know. Let him understand that if he wants you back, He'll have to go through me. Caleb, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You're going to get yourself killed over you? Yeah, probably. He turned to face her. But I'm done pretending this is just about legal protection. I'm done pretending I don't care what happens to you. Don't. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Don't make this more complicated than it already is. It's already complicated. Has been since the moment I saw you on that train platform. He touched her face gently, his thumb brushing the edge of the bruise. Elena, I know you don't love me. I know this marriage is just a means to an end for you, but that doesn't change how I feel. And how do you feel? Her voice was barely a whisper, like I've spent 19 years waiting for a second chance, and now that I've got it, I'm not letting go. She closed her eyes. You're going to break my heart all over again, aren't you? I hope not, but if that's what it takes to keep you safe. He stopped, because there wasn't a good way to finish that sentence. Elena pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. The girls heard everything. They're terrified. I know. I'll talk to them. He found Sarah and Lily in their room, huddled on the bed. Sarah's face was fierce with anger, Lily's streaked with tears. Are they going to take us back to Papa? Lily asked. No. Promise? Another promise he might not be able to keep, but looking at their scared faces, Caleb made it anyway. I promise. You're staying right here with me and Elena. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Papa has lawyers, Sarah said quietly. He told Miss Elena he'd take us to court, that the law would make us go back. Then we'll fight him in court. What if we lose? Caleb sat down on the edge of the bed. Then we'll figure something else out. But Sarah, Lily, I need you both to understand something. I'm not your real father. I can't replace the one you had. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe. That's a promise I can keep. Lily crawled into his lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck. I don't want Papa. I want you. The words hit Caleb square in the chest. He held her carefully, this fragile child who'd already lost so much. Then you've got me, he said. Both of you, for as long as you want. Sarah didn't move, but her eyes softened slightly. You really married Miss Elena? I did. Does that make you our new Papa? If you want it to. Sarah considered this. Then she nodded slowly. All right, but you have to promise not to leave, like Papa did. I promise. And you have to promise not to get mean when you drink. I don't drink much, but I promise. And you have to promise to keep Miss Elena safe, because she tries to act strong, but she's scared all the time. Caleb looked at this 8-year-old girl who saw too much and understood even more. I promise that too. Sarah nodded, satisfied. Then I guess you can be our Papa. It was the strangest, most terrifying honor Caleb had ever received. That night, he sat on the porch long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring out at the dark prairie and trying to figure out how he'd gotten here. A week ago, his life had been simple. Lonely, maybe, but simple. Now he had a wife who didn't love him, 2 daughters who weren't his blood, and a legal shitstorm brewing that could destroy everything. The door opened behind him. Elena stepped out, wrapped in a shawl. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Too much to think about. She sat down beside him, careful to keep a few inches of distance between them. The girls are calling you Papa. I heard? Does that bother you? No, terrifies me, but doesn't bother me. He glanced at her. What about you? Having regrets yet? Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I should be. This whole thing is insane. We barely know each other anymore. We're breaking 6 laws. Walter's going to fight us with everything he's got. She pulled the shawl tighter. But when I think about going back to that house, to him, her voice cracked. I can't do it, Caleb. I'd rather die than go back. You're not going back, not ever. You can't promise that. Watch me. She turned to look at him, her face pale in the moonlight. Why are you doing this? Really? And don't say it's because you love me. Love isn't enough reason to risk everything. Isn't it? No. Love fades. People leave. I've learned that the hard way. Then maybe you've been loving the wrong people. Caleb met her eyes. I'm not going to fade, Elena. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to be right here, fighting for you and those girls every single day, whether you love me back or not. That's not fair to you. Let me worry about what's fair to me." Elena looked away, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't know how to do this. How to trust someone again. How to believe it's not going to fall apart. Then don't trust me yet. Just let me prove it. Give me time to show you I mean what I say. And if Walter takes us to court, if the judge rules in his favor, then we'll run. Take the girls somewhere he can't find us. Start over. You'd do that? Give up your ranch, your whole life here?" Caleb didn't even have to think about it. In a heartbeat. She stared at him like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "You're either the best man I've ever known or completely insane." "Probably both." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Then it faded. "Caleb, even if we win, even if we somehow make this work, I can't promise you the kind of marriage you deserve. I'm too broken for that. I'm not asking you to be anything you're not, just asking you to stay. For how long? Forever, if you'll let me. But I'll take whatever you're willing to give." Elena was quiet for so long Caleb thought she might not answer. Then she said very softly, "All right, I'll stay." "Caleb," she looked at him with those bruised, honest eyes. "Don't expect me to fall in love with you. I don't know if I have that left in me anymore." "I'm not expecting anything, just hoping." She nodded slowly. Then she stood pulling the shawl tight around her shoulders. "I should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. They're all going to be hard for a while. I know." She paused at the door. "Thank you for everything. I know I haven't said it enough, but thank you." Then she was gone, leaving Caleb alone with the stars and the weight of promises he'd made. 3 days later, the summons came. Walter Kemmer was taking them to court, demanding his wife and children be returned, claiming fraud, kidnapping, and a dozen other charges that made Caleb's lawyer wince. "This is bad," Jonathan Pierce said, reading through the documents. "Really bad. He's got witnesses who'll testify you took Elena against her will. He's claiming she's being held under duress. That's a lie. Doesn't matter. He's got enough to make a case." Pierce looked up. "Caleb, you need to understand. We might lose this. The law's on his side." "Then we change the law's mind." "How?" Caleb thought about Elena's bruised face, Sarah's too serious eyes, Lily's frail body fighting off fever. "We tell the truth, every ugly, brutal piece of it, and we make sure the judge understands what going back to Walter would mean for those girls." "Really think that'll be enough?" "It has to be." The trial was set for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks to prepare, to gather witnesses, to build a case that could stand against Walter's lawyers and the weight of tradition and law. 2 weeks to save the family Caleb had only just started to build, and he was going to use every single second. The courthouse in Markers Junction was packed, every bench filled, people standing along the walls, craning their necks to see. Half the county had turned out, drawn by scandal and the promise of drama. Caleb sat at the defendant's table with Jonathan Pierce, trying not to look at the crowd, trying not to think about everything riding on the next few hours. Elena sat behind him, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully blank. She'd worn her best dress, the only one without visible mending, and pinned her hair back severe and plain, trying to look respectable, trying to look like someone worth fighting for. Walter sat across the aisle with his lawyers, 2 sharp-eyed men from Wichita who looked expensive. He'd cleaned himself up for the trial, shaved, new suit, hair slicked back, playing the part of the wronged husband, the grieving father. It made Caleb's blood boil. Judge Morrison entered, and the room fell silent. He was an old man, white-haired and stern, with the kind of face that had seen every form of human weakness and wasn't impressed by any of it. "This court is now in session," he announced, settling into his chair. "We're here to determine the custody of 2 minor children, Sarah and Lily Kemmer, currently residing with the defendant, Caleb Dawson. We're also here to address allegations of fraud, kidnapping, and interference with parental rights." His gaze swept the courtroom. "This is not a circus. Anyone who treats it like one will be removed. Understood?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Morrison looked at Walter's lawyer. "Mr. Blackwood, you may begin." Blackwood stood, buttoning his jacket. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who commanded attention just by moving. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Walter Kemmer is the biological father of Sarah and Lily Kemmer. His wife, Elena Kemmer, is their legal guardian. Mr. Dawson has unlawfully removed these children from their home and is keeping them against their father's wishes. We ask that the children be returned immediately and that Mr. Dawson face charges for his actions. Your Honor, Pierce stood quickly. The children were not removed unlawfully. They were brought to safety after being abandoned by their father for weeks. Mr. Kemmer left his family without resources, without food, while one child was gravely ill. Mrs. Kemmer, now Mrs. Dawson, had every right to seek help. Mrs. Dawson? Morrison's eyebrows rose. When did this marriage occur? 2 weeks ago, Your Honor. While she was still married to Mr. Kemmer? Pierce didn't flinch. Mr. Kemmer abandoned his family. Under territorial law, a spouse who willfully abandons their family for an extended period forfeits their marital rights. Mrs. Kemmer was within her rights to remarry for the protection and welfare of herself and the children. Blackwood's smile was sharp. That's a creative interpretation of the law, Your Honor, but the fact remains. Mrs. Kemmer was legally married to my client when she entered into this fraudulent second marriage. That makes Mr. Dawson complicit in bigamy. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Morrison banged his gavel. Enough. Mr. Blackwood, call your first witness. Walter took the stand, his hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. Caleb's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Mr. Kemmer, Blackwood began, please tell the court about your relationship with your daughters. I love them. Walter's voice was steady, practiced. They're my whole world. When their mother died, I thought I'd die too. But I kept going for them. Did my best to provide, to give them a home. And why did you seek a mail-order bride? Because they needed a mother. I couldn't do it alone. So I sent for Elena, hoping she could help us be a family again. Walter's face twisted with manufactured pain. I trusted her, brought her into my home, and she repaid that trust by running off with another man. Were you aware that Mrs. Kemmer and Mr. Dawson had a prior relationship? No, she never mentioned it. If I'd known, I never would have... He broke off, shaking his head. They must have planned this from the start, used me to get her out here, then ran off together soon as they could. The lie was so smooth, so convincing, that even Caleb almost believed it. Mr. Kemmer, there have been allegations of abuse, of drinking. How do you respond to those? Walter's face hardened. I'm not perfect. I've had a drink or two when times got hard. Who hasn't? But I never laid a hand on Elena. Never hurt my girls. That's all lies she's spreading to justify what she did. Thank you, Mr. Kemmer. No further questions. Pierce stood for cross-examination, and Caleb could see the calculation in his eyes. This was the moment that mattered. Mr. Kemmer, you say you never hurt Elena, but she came to Mr. Dawson's ranch with a split lip and bruises on her face. How do you explain that? She must have gotten hurt after she left. Maybe Dawson did it himself, trying to make me look bad. So you're suggesting Mr. Dawson beat his own wife to frame you? I'm saying I don't know how she got hurt, but it wasn't from me. Pierce pulled out a document. This is a medical report from Dr. Harrison, dated 2 weeks ago. He treated Elena Dawson for facial bruising and a split lip. He noted the injuries were consistent with being struck in the face. The report is dated the same night you and your brother went to the Kemmer homestead. Were you there that night? Walter shifted. I might have stopped by. And did you see Elena that night? Briefly. Was she injured when you saw her? I don't remember. You don't remember if your wife had a split lip and bruises on her face? Pierce's voice was cutting. How drunk were you, Mr. Kemmer? Objection, Blackwood called, badgering the witness. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Pierce. Pierce changed tactics. Mr. Kemmer, when you left for Wichita, how much money did you take with you? Just what I needed for the trip. How much was that? Walter hesitated. I don't recall exactly. Let me refresh your memory. Elena Kemmer testified in her deposition that you took $87, every cent the family had saved for spring planting. Is that accurate? I needed it for business. What business? Farm business. Supplies. And did you purchase any supplies in Wichita? Silence. Mr. Kemmer, did you purchase any farm supplies during your 3-week absence? I was handling other matters. What matters? Personal matters. Pierce leaned forward. Mr. Kemmer, isn't it true that you spent those 3 weeks drinking in Wichita saloons? That you gambled away the family's savings? That you left your wife and children with no food, no money, while one of your daughters was fighting for her life? That's not... I had a right to... Walter's composure was cracking. You had a right to abandon your family, to leave them to starve? Objection! Blackwood was on his feet. Your Honor, counsel is making speeches, not asking questions. Sustained, Mr. Pierce, ask questions or sit down. Pierce nodded. Mr. Kemmer, when did you return from Wichita? About 2 weeks ago. And what did you find when you returned to your homestead? It was empty. They were gone. Did it occur to you to wonder why? To check if they were safe? I knew she'd run off with Dawson. That's why. How did you know that? Walter blinked. What? How did you know Elena had gone to Caleb Dawson's ranch? Did you check with neighbors, ask around town? Or did you assume immediately that she'd run to another man? Someone told me. Who? I don't remember. You don't remember who told you your wife had left with another man? Pierce's voice was sharp. Or is it that you didn't care where she went as long as she was gone? That's not true. Then why didn't you check if your daughters were safe? Why didn't you go to the doctor who'd treated Lily? Why didn't you ask anyone in town if your family was all right? Walter's face was red now, sweat beading on his forehead. I was upset. I wasn't thinking straight. No, Mr. Kemmer, you were drunk. Just like you were drunk the night you hit Elena. Just like you've been drunk for most of your daughters' lives. Pierce's voice was cold. You don't want your family back because you love them. You want them back because they're property. Because losing them makes you look like the failure you are. Objection! Blackwood was shouting now. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Sustained. Mr. Pierce, that's enough. Do you have any actual questions for this witness? Pierce looked at Walter's furious, sweating face and smiled slightly. No, Your Honor. I think Mr. Kemmer has shown the court exactly who he is. The damage was done. Caleb could see it in the faces of the jury, in the way they looked at Walter with disgust instead of sympathy. But the fight wasn't over yet. Blackwood called his next witness, a neighbor who testified that Elena had seemed happy enough at the Kemmer homestead, that he'd never seen any evidence of abuse. Then a shopkeeper who said Walter had always paid his bills on time, was a respectable man. Lies and half-truths, carefully constructed to rebuild Walter's image. Then Pierce called Elena to the stand. She stood slowly, her hands shaking, and walked to the witness box. When she put her hand on the Bible, Caleb could see how pale she was, how terrified. Mrs. Dawson, Pierce began gently, please tell the court how you came to marry Walter Kemmer. Elena's voice was quiet but steady. I was desperate. My first husband had died 5 years ago, left me with nothing. I'd been living hand to mouth, moving from town to town, taking whatever work I could find. When I saw Walter's advertisement for a mail-order bride, I thought it was a chance at stability, a home. And what did you find when you arrived? A broken house, 2 terrified children, a man who drank more than he worked. She looked directly at the jury. I knew within a week I'd made a mistake, but I had nowhere else to go. So I stayed, tried to make it work. Did Mr. Kemmer ever hurt you? Elena's hand went unconsciously to her cheek. Yes, the night before I left. He came home drunk, angry that I'd let the girls go to Caleb's ranch. He said I was trying to turn his daughters against him. He hit me. Would have done worse if his brother hadn't pulled him off. Objection, Blackwood called. The witness is making unsubstantiated claims. Your Honor, Pierce said, Dr. Harrison's medical report substantiates the injuries, and we have another witness who can corroborate the attack. Then call that witness. Sustained for now. Pierce nodded. Mrs. Dawson, why did you marry Caleb Dawson? Elena's eyes found Caleb's across the courtroom. Because I was out of options. Because I was terrified of what Walter would do if he came back. Because Caleb offered me protection, and I was desperate enough to take it. Do you love him? The question hung in the air. Caleb held his breath. Elena's voice was barely audible. I don't know. I don't trust myself to know what love is anymore. But I know he's kept me safe. He's kept the girls safe. He's given us a home where we don't have to be afraid every day. That's more than I've had in years. The court orders you to return to Walter Kemmer. What will you do? I won't go. Her voice was stronger now. I'd rather die than go back to that house. And I won't let those girls go back either. They've suffered enough, even if it means being held in contempt of court. Even then. Blackwood's cross-examination was brutal. He painted Elena as a manipulative woman who'd used Walter for security, then abandoned him when a better option came along. He suggested she'd encouraged Caleb's attention, maybe even planned the whole thing from the start. Elena endured it all with quiet dignity, answering each question honestly, never rising to the bait. When she finally stepped down, Caleb could see how much it had cost her. Pierce called Dr. Harrison next, who testified about Lily's near-fatal fever, the malnutrition he'd seen in both girls, the injuries on Elena's face. Then Mrs. Henderson, who spoke about Elena's desperation, her obvious fear of Walter. Then Pierce did something Caleb hadn't expected. Your Honor, I'd like to call Sarah Kemmer to the stand. The courtroom erupted. Morrison banged his gavel. Mr. Pierce, the child is 8 years old. I'm aware, Your Honor, but she's the only one who can truly speak to what life was like in the Kemmer household. The jury deserves to hear her testimony. Blackwood was on his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The child will say whatever Mr. Dawson has coached her to say. I haven't coached her, Caleb said, standing. She deserves to be heard. Morrison considered for a long moment. The child may testify, but I'll question her first to ensure she understands the gravity of the situation. Sarah walked to the stand with her back straight, her chin up. She looked so small in the witness chair, her feet barely touching the floor. Morrison leaned forward, his stern face softening slightly. Sarah, do you know what it means to tell the truth? Yes, sir. And do you promise to tell the truth today, even if it's hard? Yes, sir. Good girl. He nodded to Pierce. Proceed. Pierce approached gently. Sarah, can you tell the court what life was like before Elena came to live with you? Bad. Her voice was small but clear. Papa was sad all the time. After Mama died, he stopped taking care of things. Stopped taking care of us. How did he stop taking care of you? He forgot to buy food sometimes. Or he'd buy whiskey instead. Lily and I would go to bed hungry. Sarah's hands were clasped tight in her lap. And he'd get mean when he drank. Not hitting mean, but yelling mean, saying terrible things. What kind of things? That we reminded him of Mama. That he wished we'd died instead of her. That we were the reason his life was ruined, her voice cracked. I know he didn't mean it, but it still hurt. And when Elena came, did things get better? For a little while. She tried so hard. She'd cook with nothing, clean the house, teach us our letters. But Papa kept drinking, kept leaving. And Elena got thinner and thinner because she'd give us her food. Did you see your father hit Elena? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. The night before we left, he came home angry, started yelling at Elena about letting us go to Mr. Dawson's ranch. She tried to calm him down, but She stopped, swallowing hard. He hit her, hard. I heard it from our room. Then Uncle Lewis came in and pulled him away, and Elena ran outside. What did you do? I held Lily and prayed Papa wouldn't come into our room. The tears spilled over now. We were so scared. Sarah, do you want to go back to your father's house? No. The word was fierce, absolute. I don't want to see Papa ever again. He's mean and he's a drunk and he doesn't care about us. What about Lily? Does she want to go back? Lily's terrified of him. She has nightmares every night about Papa coming to take us away. Sarah looked at the jury with those two old eyes. Please don't make us go back, please. Mr. Dawson takes care of us. He's kind. He doesn't yell or drink or hit people. He makes us feel safe. And Elena, she loves us, really loves us, like Mama did before she got sick. Sarah, Pierce said softly, if the court decides you have to go back to your father, what will you do? She looked at Caleb, then at Elena, then back at the jury. I'll run away, soon as I can, and I'll take Lily with me. We'll live on the streets if we have to, but we won't go back to Papa. The courtroom was dead silent. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Does the witness have any questions for this child? Blackwood stood, but he looked uncomfortable. Sarah, isn't it true that your father has never actually hit you? Not with his hands, but words hurt too. But physical abuse, that's what we're discussing. He never struck you or your sister, correct? No, sir. And the drinking. Many men drink, Sarah. That doesn't make them bad fathers. It does when they spend the food money on whiskey. It does when they leave for weeks and don't come back. It does when they make their children cry themselves to sleep every night. Sarah's voice was stronger now. I know Papa's your client, sir. I know you have to defend him, but I also know the truth. And the truth is he stopped being a good father a long time ago. Blackwood had no response to that. He sat down, looking defeated. Morrison dismissed Sarah. She walked back to sit beside Elena, who pulled her close. Pierce rested his case. The closing arguments were fierce. Blackwood painted Caleb and Elena as lawbreakers who'd stolen another man's family. Pierce painted Walter as an abusive drunk who'd forfeited his right to his children through neglect and violence. Then Morrison called a recess to deliberate. The wait was agony. An hour passed, then 2. The courtroom buzzed with speculation, people placing bets on the outcome. Caleb sat with Elena and the girls, not speaking, just waiting. Finally, Morrison returned. The courtroom fell silent. This court has reviewed the evidence and testimony, Morrison began, his voice grave. This is not an easy case. The law generally favors keeping children with their biological parents. However, the law also recognizes that parental rights are not absolute. They can be forfeited through abandonment, neglect, or abuse. He looked at Walter. Mr. Kemmer, I find your testimony unconvincing. Multiple witnesses have corroborated Mrs. Dawson's account of your drinking, your absences, your neglect of your children. The medical evidence supports her claim of abuse. And most damningly, your own daughter testified to the fear and suffering she experienced under your care. Walter's face went white. However, Morrison continued, I also find the second marriage between Mrs. Kemmer and Mr. Dawson to be legally questionable. A woman cannot simply remarry because her first husband is inconvenient. Caleb's stomach dropped. That said, Morrison's voice hardened. The purpose of this hearing is not to punish Mrs. Dawson for her choices. It's to determine what's best for Sarah and Lily Kemmer. And based on the evidence presented, I find that returning these children to their father's custody would put them at risk of neglect and emotional harm. He banged his gavel once. Custody of Sarah and Lily Kemmer is hereby awarded to Elena Dawson, with Caleb Dawson as their legal guardian. Mr. Kemmer's parental rights are suspended pending completion of a rehabilitation program for alcohol dependency. He will be allowed supervised visitation only at the discretion of the guardians. The courtroom erupted. Walter was shouting, Blackwood was arguing, but Morrison just kept talking. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into the validity of the Dawson marriage. If it's found to be fraudulent, Mrs. Dawson will have 6 months to either reconcile her first marriage or obtain a legal divorce. However, custody of the children will remain with the Dawsons regardless of the marriage outcome. He banged his gavel again. This court is adjourned. Caleb couldn't breathe, couldn't think. They'd won. Not completely, not perfectly, but they'd won the part that mattered. The girls were safe. Elena turned to him, her face streaked with tears, and for the first time since he'd seen her on that train platform, she smiled. Really smiled. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. Caleb pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw, not caring what anyone thought. She collapsed against him, shaking with relief and exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. Behind them, Walter was still shouting, threatening appeals, lawyers, revenge. But his words were empty now. He'd lost. Sarah and Lily threw their arms around both of them, crying and laughing at the same time. We get to stay? Lily asked through her tears. You get to stay, Caleb confirmed. Forever. Pete found them in the crowd outside the courthouse. Well, boss, you did it. You're officially a father. Terrifying, isn't it? Absolutely. Pete grinned. But I figure if anyone can handle it, it's you. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. The girls fell asleep in the back of the wagon, exhausted from the emotion of the day. Elena sat beside Caleb, close enough that their shoulders touched. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we go home, live our lives, raise those girls. And the marriage investigation? We'll deal with it. Get you a proper divorce from Walter. Make our marriage legal. He glanced at her. Unless you want out. Once you're divorced, you'll be free. You could... Caleb. She put her hand over his. I'm not leaving. You might change your mind once. I won't. Her voice was firm. I know this started as survival. I know I married you because I was desperate. But these past few weeks, watching you fight for us, seeing how you are with the girls... She stopped, searching for words. You're a good man. Better than I deserve. And if you're willing to have me, even knowing I'm broken and difficult and probably going to mess this up, I'd like to try to make this real. Caleb's heart stopped. Real? A real marriage. Not just legal protection. She met his eyes. I can't promise I'll be a perfect wife. Can't promise I know how to love someone properly anymore. But I can promise I'll try. Elena, you don't have to, I want to. She squeezed his hand. You said you'd wait until I was ready. Well, I'm ready. Or at least, I'm willing to try to be ready. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop, right there in the middle of the road, and turned to face her. Are you sure? No. I'm terrified, but I'm also... She smiled, shaky but genuine. I'm also starting to believe that maybe I deserve something good. Maybe we all do. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she might break. She kissed him back, tentative at first, then stronger. When they pulled apart, she was crying again. But this time the tears looked different. I think I might be falling in love with you, she whispered. Is that crazy? If it is, then we're both crazy. She laughed, pressing her forehead against his. What have we gotten ourselves into? No idea, but I'm looking forward to figuring it out. The seasons changed. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall. The divorce from Walter came through quietly. He disappeared somewhere into the territories, too broken and bitter to fight anymore. Caleb and Elena remarried, properly this time, in a small ceremony with Pete and Mrs. Henderson as witnesses. The girls wore new dresses and flowers in their hair, and Sarah said it was the best day of her life. The ranch thrived. Caleb taught Sarah how to ride, how to mend fences, how to read the weather. Lily helped Elena in the garden, learning to grow vegetables and bake bread. They became a family in truth, not just on paper. Some nights Caleb would wake up and have to remind himself it was real, that Elena was beside him, that the girls were safe down the hall, that he hadn't somehow dreamed this life into existence. Elena still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched when someone raised their voice. But slowly, carefully, she healed. And Caleb was there for every moment of it, patient and steady, never pushing, always present. One evening in late autumn, they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and red. The girls were inside, arguing over whose turn it was to set the table. Normal childhood sounds. I never thought I'd have this, Elena said quietly, leaning against Caleb's shoulder. A home, a family, peace. Neither did I. Do you ever regret it? Taking us in? Caleb turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Not for 1 second. Best decision I ever made. Even when Sarah tracks mud through the house? Or Lily puts a frog in the water bucket? Especially then. Elena smiled. You're a strange man, Caleb Dawson. And you're stuck with me. Lucky me. She meant it. He could hear it in her voice, see it in her eyes. She'd finally learned to trust again, to believe in something lasting. There's something I haven't told you, Elena said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. What's that? I'm pregnant. For a moment, Caleb couldn't process the words. Then they hit him like a thunderbolt, and he swept her up, spinning her around on the porch while she laughed. You're sure? Dr. Harrison confirmed it yesterday, about 3 months along. 3 months? Why didn't you... I wanted to be sure. After everything that happened, I didn't want to get your hopes up if... She stopped. But it's real. We're having a baby. Caleb set her down gently, his hand going to her still flat stomach. A baby. Are you happy? Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. The girls burst out onto the porch. What's all the noise about? Sarah demanded. Elena looked at Caleb, who nodded. We have some news, Elena said, pulling both girls close. You're going to have a brother or sister. Lily's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Will it be a baby? Sarah asked. Yes, a very small baby. Can I help take care of it? We'll all take care of it, together. The girls started talking over each other, full of questions and excitement. Caleb watched his family, and felt something settle deep in his chest, something that felt like completion. That winter was harsh, but they barely noticed. The house was warm, the pantry was full, and the girls filled every room with noise and life. Elena bloomed as her pregnancy progressed, the haunted look finally fading from her eyes. The baby came in early spring, a boy with dark hair and his mother's eyes. They named him Thomas, after no one in particular, because he was theirs and needed no legacy but the love they'd give him. Sarah and Lily were devoted big sisters, fighting over who got to hold him, who got to help with feedings. Caleb would find Elena sometimes, sitting in the rocking chair with Thomas in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Happy tears, she'd assure him. Just happy tears. Years passed. The ranch grew. The children grew. Thomas learned to walk, then run, then ride. Sarah turned into a fierce young woman who could outwork most of the ranch hands. Lily discovered a talent for healing, spending hours with Dr. Harrison learning medicine. Caleb and Elena grew old together, their love deepening into something solid and unshakable. They had their fights, their difficult days, but they also had laughter and partnership and the bone-deep knowledge that they'd chosen each other over and over every single day. One afternoon, nearly 20 years after that first moment on the train platform, Caleb and Elena rode out to the ridge overlooking the ranch. Their hair was graying now, their bodies slower, but their hands still fit together perfectly. Remember when we stood here the first time? Elena asked. When you just brought us home and everything was terrifying and uncertain? I remember thinking I'd probably just made the biggest mistake of my life. She elbowed him. Liar. All right. I remember thinking I'd do anything to keep you, even if it meant watching you leave someday. I'm not leaving. I know. He pulled her closer. Took me a while to believe it, but I know now. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their ranch spread out below them. Sarah was teaching her younger brother to rope cattle. Lily was in the garden with her own children. She'd married a good man, a teacher, and settled in a house just down the road. The land was alive with family, with the future they'd built together. Do you think Walter ever thinks about us? Elena asked quietly. Probably, but I don't care. Caleb meant it. Walter had disappeared into the past, a shadow that no longer had power over them. He lost. We won. It wasn't a competition. Wasn't it? Elena considered. Maybe it was. A fight for the right kind of life. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm glad we won. Me too. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me, for fighting when I couldn't, for being stubborn and crazy and willing to risk everything. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for trusting me when you had no reason to, for building this life with me. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her, soft and familiar. 20 years of kisses hadn't made it less sweet. Think we did all right? She asked. Caleb looked at their land, their children, the life they'd carved out of desperation and hope. Yeah, I think we did better than all right. You know what I realized? Elena's voice was thoughtful. That day on the train platform, when I saw you, I thought it was the worst timing in the world, that love had come too late, that we'd missed our chance 19 years ago. And now? Now I think it came exactly when we were strong enough to fight for it. She smiled. We weren't ready for each other back then. We would have broken under the weight of it. But now we're unbreakable. Now we're unbreakable, she agreed. The sun began to set, painting the sky in colors that would have made a lesser artist weep. They sat together on that ridge, watching their world turn gold, and neither of them said what they were both thinking. That this ordinary, beautiful, hard-won life was worth every broken moment that came before it. That love didn't always come when you wanted it. Sometimes it came when you needed it most. And that the best stories weren't about perfect people finding easy happiness. They were about broken people fighting like hell to build something worth keeping. As the stars began to appear overhead, Caleb helped Elena to her feet. Her joints protested these days, same as his. They were getting old, but they were getting old together, and that made all the difference. They rode back down to the ranch, where lamplight spilled warm from the windows and the sound of family laughter drifted on the evening air. Home. Not the home Elena had dreamed of as a young woman, and not the life Caleb had imagined for himself all those years ago. Something better. Something real. Something they'd earned through faith and stubbornness and a love that refused to die, even when everything else was falling apart. Sarah met them at the barn, taking the horses. "Supper's ready. Lily and her family are staying. We set extra places." "We'll be right in," Caleb said. He and Elena stood in the yard for a moment longer, hand in hand, looking at the house they'd filled with life and love and noise. "Ready?" he asked. Elena squeezed his hand. "Always." And together they walked into the warm light of home, into the family they'd built from ashes and hope, into the rest of their lives. The door closed behind them, and the prairie night settled soft and quiet over the land. Somewhere out there, Walter Kemmer was probably drinking himself into oblivion in some forgotten town, bitter and alone. But here, there was laughter and lamplight and love that had survived every test. Here, there was a future worth fighting for. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered.